encounter that being. The moon is going through every month and touching that spot. The moon is moving really fast.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. Because isn't the, where the, okay, I'm not quite grasping that. Isn't it that now, because of the tropical,
so
it's not,
just, that's not part of the conversation. They're just in a particular spot.
No, I know. That's not what I'm wanting to ask, but maybe I should ask you later. It's something about the constellations.
It's confusing, the difference between the tropical and the sidereal, because they have the same names.
No, but that's not what I wanted to ask, because if it says in your birth that it's really, I don't know if you say, for instance, Mars is in, let's say, Leo or something. Yes. Is it really in Leo, or is it actually in some? Is it actually in another sign? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Right. So, what I'm saying to you is, don't burden yourself with that right now. Mars is in a particular spot, and then it moved. From the moment I was born, it will never be in the same relationship to everything else that it was at that moment of my birth. What makes that spot so significant in my biography then as I live? Something is occurring at that spot relative to me. What I was talking about is that it's a being, a spiritual being that is guarding that spot. So don't get caught in the where is that spot yet. It takes a long time to live with that incongruity between tropical and sidereal and say, oh, it's okay. So trust me, it's okay. And if it's okay, it's good to wrestle with it. Like, wait, it doesn't make sense. Yes?
The forces that come from each of these elements of the zodiac come to us when the sun is in each one of these. Is that correct?
So what Ima von Eckertstein was given as a task by Rudolf Steiner was to meditate on the rising sun and to remember that as it rose, there were a group of stars behind it. And the forces of those stars would stream over the sun toward the human being on the earth.
And what is it about the sun that brings those forces to us?
Well, I will hazard an answer to that. You know, the sun is a life-giving force, and it illuminates for us this sense-perceptible world. It's what makes it possible for us to see that we're here. Well, we've got the electric light going on right now, but if we were outside, you can see things because the light is shining on it, the light from the sun, the warmth of it, and how it draws forth life from the earth as well. That it has this relationship of, as this is streaming toward us, the sunlight illuminates it for us. Is that?
But there's the zodiac, all the signs are always influencing it. But at the moment when the sun is in it, it's adding its power to it. You could also see it that way?
You could, and I guess this would also be a good time to just lightly touch on the virtues, which, as you shared, Rudolf Steiner did not create the virtues, but what he did with them, in addition to their being assigned to the different signs of the zodiac, he talked about their becoming. So, for instance, the virtue patience. Patience is a virtue, we always say that. What Rudolf Steiner did with that is say, okay, patience becomes insight. Okay, how? Why? Why does it become insight? And Scorpio, well, heck, that's the reproductive organ. So think about a teenager. Patience. Patience, you'll have insight later. You know, you could say that it's wise, but in trying to live with that, what I have arrived at is that it could be. But I like to think that we are engaged in this. There is an ongoing conversation and that we are participating, know it or not. Wherever in the cycle of the year we exhibit patience. It's gathered up by the spiritual world. And when the sun is moving through Scorpio, it makes use of the substance of our patience. And that we can experience what comes toward us is insight. not just in Scorpio, but that's the gift that we can receive, that maybe we can use at another time when we need it. So each one of these, but we're not confined to a time of year, but that perhaps that's how we weave with the sunlight. Let's see, Pisces, magnanimity becomes love. So magnanimity, wherever I have this largeness of feeling, not only toward others, but even in my assessment of myself and my capacities. That wherever I allow that, then when the sun arrives among the stars of Pisces, love is coming toward us on the sunlight. But it's not a real clunk on the head, oh, the love has arrived. It's not that kind of an experience. But we are helping the sun. And to recognize that we can offer assistance to the angel. We are participating in an ongoing conversation. The conversation never stopped, we just stopped hearing it. It stopped knowing that we were participating in it. Stars spake once to man. It is world destiny that they are silent tonight. It belongs to the destiny of the world that we would lose this understanding, but now we're trying to awaken it. But we can't just go back and do what was done before. So it's kind of the small steps, which is why I'm not always the best at answering the question. It's kind of trying to make our way and recognizing that there are incongruities. I heard someone once told me what Dennis Klochek had to say about the alchemical wedding of Christian Rosenkreutz. When you read it, that it increases our capacity for incongruity. That's what we need, because I can't figure out why the tropical and the sidereal are the same. You know, and I, in my life and my experience as an astrologer and trying to study astrosophy and working with astronomy, I have learned that the sidereal zodiac is really hard for me to penetrate and to understand how it's related to me. And I keep waiting to get old enough for it to make sense. So I don't want to give the impression that you shouldn't pay attention to it, but I do want to give the impression that don't get hung up on it, which is what Hazel Straker said to me. They're all correct. Just deal with it. Deal with it. So it really is, and if you're stuck there, just go, oh, I'm stuck on something.
But the practice of now we'll pass out the virtues tomorrow. I didn't bring it with me tonight.
Oh,
I could go easily to the room and get it and pass it out tonight, but it'll lure you back tomorrow. But the tricky part of the virtues is, are you practicing the virtue in a selfless way? Mm-hmm. I mean, magnanimity sounds like being generous. Mm-hmm. Sounds like, oh, that's a great virtue. Right. But why are you being magnanimous? Yes. Is it to satisfy you, put you on an ego trip of being so goody-goody two-shoes? That will not become love. Right. And the patience...
So it does have its fallen... I don't know if that sheet that you had shows the fallen expression of it.
The fallen expression?
Yeah, I have the, what does it become if it's, you're not really...
Oh.
Yeah. I'll show that to you.
Oh, please do.
Can see. So the idea is, you don't only practice being magnanimous when the sun is in Pisces. It's just a construct. It's saying, okay, since the 1500s we've been ingrained with the idea that the earth is moving, but we have to stop the earth so we can think about it. That's all. We're stopping something so that we can look at it and then say, all right, now it can move again because I've got my inner picture. It's just like a closing entries in accounting. It's just a snapshot of a moment that doesn't exist beyond that moment. But you use it to assess, okay, what did we do and what do we need to do? It's the same thing. You stop a thing that's in constant motion long enough that you can think about it. It could take a lifetime. It could take lifetimes of really trying to find your feet on something solid. It creates a lot of fear to think that the earth is moving. And when you think about the Copernican thought, this was before Newton's theory of gravitational force. So the question surely had to arise, well then if we're moving, what's keeping us here? It's keeping us on the earth. Fortunately, at that time, you had this tremendous outpouring of Renaissance art and all these images of the divine that is embracing and protecting the human being on the earth. Rudolf Steiner explains that when we fall into sleep, and this sensation of falling away from the earth, that it creates fear. And what the response of the soul to the fear is a longing to know the connection to the divine. So longing is a very important part of the process. Fear is a trigger to this longing for finding the fixed thing, the solid thing. But we are trying to, this is going way far afield, but to arrive at fixed star existence, rather than just Earth, planetary existence in this solar system. What is it to be a fixed star? So to really find that inner steadiness and that inner still point, knowing that it's always in motion. So I don't know, that question about the sidereal and tropical is, one of the ways I suggest you deal with it is to draw a picture of yourself on the earth, and then draw a circle around that and divide it into 12, then draw another circle and divide that into 12, and then move those circles. And just have the experience of doing that. And just live with what thoughts arise out of that, because that's all that's happening. It's a concept that we have that since ancient times thinkers about this have used to build a construct for understanding our place in all of this.
And in this work, I think probably you mentioned this already, why the choice to work with the sidereal Zodiac for this work, for behind the...
So that's asking a question about who created the calendar. I don't know why they made that decision.
Ah, okay.
And so
in
in the calendar of the soul, the sun images are loosely based on the sidereal zodiac, but then there's a moon image next to each day. But it's the moon in the tropical zodiac. So just to keep it confusing, both were used. So you could say that the tropical zodiac is our perception, everything from the moon into the human being physically on the earth. And when you get beyond the moon sphere, then you're dealing with the sidereal zodiac. That's another way of thinking about it.
Did Elizabeth Freya work with this original soul calendar? Because she worked a lot with the original astrosopher. Did she work with Rudolf Steiner on this? Do you know?
She, I know, worked with the sidereal zodiac.
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
it's really, for me personally, I'm not telling you this has to be this way. For me personally, I have to have access to both. Mm-hmm. And I think it has to do with how we're related to the earth, and how we're related to the stars and the planets in that motion, and how we're connected in our bodies. You know, fully incarnate into the physical body with a full, fluffy etheric, and then the astral.
Can you say something about that upper picture?
So I put this aside and up here. This is a image of the cover that was etched in glass. I think that the color was more purple. This has a bit of a pink to it. So it's I don't know German, but that's the I, which is I. Mm-hmm. And it's the Christ released as a dove from the spiritual world, penetrating the earth and then rising up again from the earth. It appeared, in my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this appears 3 times. And how I've worked with it is that, especially during the holy nights, I will draw that image at winter solstice, and then I begin with Aries, and then on the midnight on New Year's Eve, I do it again, and then on Epiphany, I do it again. So that there's this threefold embrace of this image. And I think, Herbert, you could probably talk more about it than I can, but it has this kind of this threefold experience going on. Somebody being released from the spiritual world into the earth and then rising up from the earth.
And we'll also use that tomorrow morning. And bring your sheets with you that have the other side of the chart, of the lemniscate, the other side
Right,
is the
so
cover.
it shows the cover.
And this is a
So
rendering
it's-
of it.
So it's coming, penetrating the earth and releasing from the earth, so it's this whole becoming and an attempt to show that in one image, which is really an artistic challenge, I think.
I didn't understand the 3 times.
So, as I understand it, this dove at the top.
Appears 3 times in the book.
Oh, yeah, this whole image, I thought that I had read that it appears 3 times
So
in the
the
book.
twice, front cover, back cover, and somewhere else too?
In the middle? Is
We'll
it
have to
not?
look.
We'll have to
I
look.
wasn't aware of that. We'll
Yeah.
look. But the way you've given it,
Mhm.
lovely. I just
Yeah.
didn't hear of that 3-time thing.
Yeah. So, the earth being penetrated by the Christ being, and then rising up. And then this image, and even Margot Rosler talks about this image being like the traditional glyph of Aries. So there's this, even the artist trying to understand, how do we use, because these are not symbols, these are images. It's not intended for these to become symbols. They need to be living. And it could be that this has changed. What does this look like now, and where is the artist that can do this kind of contemplation? And to really have this experience. And I can stand here and talk about it. And some of them there's a stronger relationship with, and some it's more weak. But the more of us that take it up, the more we can support one another in really figuring that out, which I think belongs to our future.
Of course, if that is an Aries, then that makes sense, because that that is connecting with what Steiner designates as the birth of the ego, the birth of the ich, of the I, in 33 AD,
When it would have been in.
which is 1,879 years later, is 1912, when the calendar appeared. That's why it's dated that way. So having an Aries connection, because it was in Aries at the time, makes sense, doesn't it?
And I've also
Since it was
heard
Aries
that-
then.
And that's why early Christians then, though, drew the symbol of the fish in the sand to represent that they were Christians to one another, because the precession of the equinox put it in Pisces. So it was moving. So the symbol became a fish. So it's, I don't know when there's going to be a reform. So, okay, we're done with the tropical zodiac now, and we just go with the sidereal. It's like a calendar reform. It causes a great upset when you try to adjust the calendar. The Gregorian calendar that's universally accepted in the world as this universal civic calendar was created during the time of Pope Gregory XIII. It was not intended to be a universal calendar. It was for the church. It took about 300 years for it to be accepted around the world. We were talking about this at lunch. I can't remember who I was talking about this with. But when you think about economic trade and things that can happen once the calendars around the world coordinate, and also, though, what happens to different cultures, because they each have their own calendar. And this thing that we create to represent our understanding of the experience of human life moving through time, we call it a calendar. But in every culture, in every age of man, there have been these amazing things created out of an attempt to describe, here's what we believe to be our relationship. Pyramids, temples, great stone monoliths, calendars. Now we have calendars hanging out, you can put it in on your iPhone and just press a button and there it is, but what it takes to get to that moment. So I think that with trying to work with this, it doesn't allow us to be comfortable. And just saying, yeah, well, it's Tuesday, it's March, whatever. Yeah, but really, where did that come from? Also, prior to the time of Pope Gregory, the New Year was celebrated at the Feast of the Annunciation in March. So August, September, October, November, these are the 8, 9, 10 months from March. That's why they're numbered that way. That's why they have that name. So that gets adjusted. And when Pope Gregory, when he adjusted the calendar, rather than what they determined was that the Julian calendar, which was then in use, was 11 days off. And it needed to be adjusted so that Easter was being celebrated on the right day. And rather than take one day out for each of 11 years and make a gradual change, he said, no, we'll take 11 days all at once. Everybody went to bed on October 4th and they got up and it was October 15th. And it did cause riots almost every time it was adopted in a different culture, including in America. It was in the 1750s when America was still a colony of Great Britain. And there's a famous painting of protest in Boston, I think, and in the background there's a banner that says, "Give us back our days." So it's this kind of something that bridges. There's all these hidden places in the calendar. I like to call October 4th to the 15th the Gregory days. And then there's something that you needed to slide in there that you hadn't done yet. That's the secret days that didn't exist. You know, we have them now. Rip Van Winkle, you know, he goes to sleep before the American Revolution, then he wakes up afterward and says, well, I'm in allegiance to King George, and they almost kill him. But he somehow, by sleeping through that period of time and then waking up, serves as a bridge. You know, the day, I call them the days of Tehote. Those 5 days, I put them at the beginning of our year, so from January 1st to the 5th, that the Egyptians put at the end of the calendar that don't exist in the month or in the year. They're sacred days when a god and a goddess can be experienced. So it's all tucked in there. Blue moon. The traditional definition of a blue moon is the third blue moon in a season when there are 4 full moons. Typically there's 1 full moon a month. There's 3 months in a season, so you'll have 3 full moons. But because the solar and lunar rhythms are different, occasionally you will have 4 full moons in one season. The third one, the early calendar makers in the church, setting up their festivals, said that's going to mix everything up, we'll just pull it out and call it a blue moon.
We have one coming up.
Well,
no?
In the 1940s, in Sky and Telescope magazine, a reporter made a mistake, said a blue moon was the second full moon in one calendar month.
That's right.
I was born to blue moon.
And so this year there will be a blue moon, according to that definition.
Oh,
A traditional blue moon can only ever happen in February, May, August, and November. Yeah. But by the other definition, it can happen in almost any month. And there will be a blue moon on August 31st this year. And you are all invited to northern Michigan to come on a cruise with me across the Straits of Mackinac, which is the piece of water that joins Lake Huron and Lake Michigan over the tip of the Michigan Mitt. And we will depart from Mackinac City and head west towards sunsetting into Lake Michigan underneath the Mackinac Bridge, which is the longest suspension bridge in the Western Hemisphere, and then turn back to the east to see the full blue moon rising over Lake Huron.
Will there be wine and cheese?
Blue moon beer. So, it's really a lovely environment for stargazing and having this experience of the cosmos to be on a body of water, because the water, one of the main properties is that it's reflecting to us sunlight and the moonlight and the starlight. So when you think, what is it, 70% of the earth is covered with water? That it's reflecting all of that. We're very fortunate that the water is doing that for us.
I know you mentioned last night about Venus and Mercury being switched. Is that not maybe explaining all